Okay, so I'm Lauren Burnett.
Hi, I'm Catherine Kate Baltazar.
Is it recording?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. It just didn't show up on my screen, so I want to make sure.
It says recording with.
Oh, there it is. Got it. I see it now.
There goes 5 minutes. Okay.
Okay. The first question, what doctrine in Wilbur's heart drove him to advocate? Why is the doctrine of the family so important to have in your heart to be passionate and persistent? So I said, I think that the doctrine of equality and the sanctity of life drove Wilbur to advocate to abolish the slave trade. From the very beginning of the movie, we learn that Wilbur values all life. He asked his driver to pull over in the rain so he could stop the abuse of the horse. Wilbur also keeps like a lot of animals in his house as pets because he values everybody's life, even animals. He believes everyone should be treated equally regardless of the color of their skin. And he spent his whole life trying to make a difference because of that drive in his heart. I also think his desire to serve God drove him. In one scene, Wilbur was laying in the grass and he told his cook that he would rather study God's creations than do all of the things that he had to do that day. Eventually, his friends were able to convince him that he could serve God and work as a politician at the same time. He used his position and influence to better the world around him, and I think that it's important to have the doctrine of the family in our heart at all times because it's essential to our Heavenly Father's plan. If that doctrine is not in our hearts, then we will not always be striving to work towards those meaningful goals. And always remembering the blessings that we are promised through our righteousness can fuel our passion. So that's what I put.
I love that. We point out some wonderful things about the animals and stuff. That's something I point out later, but I love it. What I put was that God made men equal and that we are all God's children. This should motivate us as it did to Wilbur to promote the well-being and happiness of our brothers and sisters. It is important to be passionate and persistent about good things so that we may see them through. What I've seen was the doctrine of agency in the movie, that we must all choose and act for ourselves. This describes slavery as being an act that removes the agency of men by forcing people to not do another person's will. The doctrine of grace, of course, was in there too. Grace is a doctrine that we are not saved by our own actions, but we are saved through God's grace, which has the power to make us whole. In this case, the slaves were not saved through their own actions. They were saved by the actions of Wilbur and his supporters. The doctrine of the atonement was also mentioned, that no matter how terrible we have been, Christ's atonement can cleanse our sins and save us all. In the case of the Amazing Grace, the preacher who was involved in the buying and selling of human beings, their inhumane treatment and death, realized the error that he's made, and he finally is able to help out Wilbur to change that later in the movie. The doctrine of forgiveness was one of the biggest one in the Amazing Grace. It shows that we as individuals, communities can seek forgiveness and be cleansed from our sin through faith and repentance and grace. The doctrine of family is very important to have in our heart in order to be passionate and persistent, because when we see others as our brothers and sisters wanting the best for each other, we will seek to do what's best for them and us. We would treat them the way we want to be treated and love them as God loves them and us.
I love that. I love that you mentioned the preacher, the guy who like changed his life. That was a really important doctrine that I didn't put, but I really liked that.
Yeah, that was very touching of what happened with him. And just, I know the song is like, once we were blind, now we see, and it's just like he's blind, I believe, right?
Yeah, in the end, yeah, he was
blind.
Yeah.
And he still was there at the end, like cheering on and so happy about it. So question 2, how did Wilbur employed, okay, this is the hardest question ever, employed at their Brumfen, how do you say that?
Bronfenbrenner?
Okay, thank you. Approach to become a more effective advocate. Identify at least one thing in each system and be specific. So for the microsystem, I put the Wilbur created a box to help him understand that what slaves endured. He saw the chains.
Yeah, the chains.
Where they used to they used to control slaves during their transportation and stuff. For Meso system, Wilbur surrounded himself with anti-slavery advocates like Aquino.
Yeah, Equiano.
The little dark guy.
I wasn't sure how to spell his name. Yeah.
Yeah, and Clarkson. Exorcism. It feels like exorcism. Worked to involve communities through petitions, events. He pushed for an alternative to slave sugar in the form of free men's sugar. So he made that little sugar-free men or something like that. And microsystem. Wilbur pulled on the Christianity of Parliament to help push the anti-slavery agenda. He called upon the humanity in Parliament. Sorry, this word.
No, it's okay.
To vote against the slave trade. And for Creno system, he used the cultural. Okay, these words are pretty long. Patriotism to create laws, policies that made trading of slaves during war extremely dangerous and unprofitable. He pulled on the desires of all men to be free.
Nice. We agreed on a lot of those. For the microsystem, I said that Wilbur stood strong in his beliefs even when most of his period had differing opinions. He remained true and was an example to those around him, and he let his opinion be known to everyone around him. For the mesosystem, I said, Wilbur advocated all the time and was helped by several friends and anti-slave advocates. His preacher eventually helped him advocate by documenting his experiences as a slave ship captain. Other acquaintances of his also assisted him by sharing their accounts, and he helped everyone in his microsystem who supported his belief come together to strengthen their cause. Wilbur helped unite friends, family, church members, and other peers. And in that dinner, it was kind of a good example of all those people coming together in that system.
Yeah.
For the exosystem, I said in this system, Wilbur used the media to advocate. It was mentioned in the movie that when all of his evidence and research was collected, reporters published it. Having his research published through the newspaper and having the accounts published in the books allowed his message to reach hundreds and thousands of people and open their eyes. Neighbors also fall under the exosystem, and Wilbur was always assisting those around him. He provided food to families of those who were not as well off as him. Even when those guests invited friends and family to eat, Wilbur didn't ever turn them away, and when beggars came to his door, he made sure that his cook always fed them.
True.
For the macro system, I said, at the time, the culture was that of accepting slavery. Wilbur, however, did not accept this like everybody else around him. He worked almost his whole life to change the culture. And at the end of the movie, we see that his efforts were rewarded when attitudes had changed enough that slavery was no longer as supported as it was in the beginning. For the chrono system, I said, eventually laws were passed to ban the slave trade. The movie showed people's opinions start changing. The preacher, for example, was once a slave ship captain, and after all that he had done, he repented and dedicated his life to God. He wrote Amazing Grace and documented his accounts as evidence against the slave trade. To me, this is an example that of changes over a lifetime. It's an example of proof that people can change, and Wilbur helped in that change.
Beautiful. I totally forgot about the beggars and more into the detail of the preacher. Seriously, he did aren't you supposed to be a super good person to be a preacher? That just shows me how the atonement's so real.
Yeah.
And I hope they realize that too.
Yeah.
That's just wonderful. Wow. I think it's your turn.
Oh yeah, sorry. 3. How did Wilbur and his fellow advocates do and share their research? What evidence did they provide to persuade those opposing or on the fence? So I said, during the scene towards the beginning of the movie when Wilbur is sharing his opinion in the House of Commons, I think that's what it was called, he used statistics regarding how many Americans were actually loyal to the crown, because people were stating that, I think they were throwing out numbers, and Wilbur corrected them, so he used statistics at that point. And then Wilbur and his fellow advocates used first-hand accounts as their evidence. They spoke with slave ship captains, crew members, and slaves who survived their journeys, and Wilbur and the others learned about what they witnessed on the slave ships and what the slaves themselves had to endure. Not only did Wilbur and the other advocates speak with those witnesses, they also sought out tangible evidence. They obtained the shackles and the chains so that they could show people those. And they also personally got on those ships to see for themselves where the slaves were and what the conditions were like. The evidence was sometimes shared unexpectedly with the people that didn't agree with him, like that one time when he like surprised all those wealthy people on the ship.
Yeah.
So I said that one sec. Sorry, I lost my spot.
That was touching.
Yeah. And so I said by surprising those people, he kind of like forced them to see the truth. Like they weren't expecting it, but I thought that was effective because I think that they probably wouldn't have like willingly gone and like seen that ship, but he surprised them and kind of forced them to see the truth for themselves. And then I also said another way that they gathered and like showed their evidence was that I think it was Equiano published that book and sold a bunch of copies.
Mm-hmm.
So he like his account.
I remember that one.
Huh?
I remember that one. Like, I remember people started buying it a lot.
Yeah. So I said that was a way that they shared their evidence because of like his story got out. So that's what I put for that one.
That was awesome. Thank you. I actually just put one of those examples that you put down too.
Okay.
For the third question, I put that he and his fellow advocates, of course, met all the time, often to discuss what they've been doing so far and everything. They also discussed many actions to be taken and everything. In one meeting, they discussed that they need to try a different approach and attack slavery by attacking the issue of vessels flying neutral flags during wartime. On the other occasion, Wilbur and his fellow advocates arranged for MPs, the little guy.
Oh yeah, MPs or something.
MPs Fox or something like that, who were on the fence about joining the cause on a boat ride in the harbor as the boat passed the Madagascar.
Yeah.
The slave ship. Wilbur told of his recent he told people about like the souls that they carry and the death and torture and everything that was happening. He made the people, like you mentioned, like I'm glad that he actually surprised them there because they were like, oh, drinking coffee and enjoying time. And then he like popped out of there and just told them about the smell of death, like to smell it and to realize that, and how touching that was for like many of them. And how some of them were even crying. So that was just like touching, and then showing the little change or what happened with the slaves. They used their meetings to also discuss potential threats to their position in the way of the Scottish turncoat who left the cause of fears and economic crash. Wilbur and his fellow advocates gathered signatures showing that the people of England were opposed to the slave trade. So that was also nice to see that he gathered a bunch of signatures and showed it in that little meeting or something.
I forgot to include that one. That was a good one.
Yeah, that was a big giant evidence right there that people do.
There's a ton of signatures.
Yes. So for question 4, how does the film portray the importance of working with and learning from others in the group? What has family advocacy collaboration taught you? Why do you think it's a good idea to discuss your thoughts with your peers each week in Zoom meetings? Oh yeah, I have to go, right? So first of all, I really enjoyed our times with the group, that everyone was able to discuss their own opinions, and how at the end, like, there was not any screaming or anything, or like it just felt like we were just all in the conversation. So the film shows how working in the group, Wilbur and his associates were able to accomplish the impossible and end the slave trade. So if they were able to end something, then there's obviously something that we as a team do good. Like, for example, we won't be able to get together and stop something big, but it just shows that we can actually do that later in the future as we continue learning more about certain topics. The film also shows how the group was able to organize a movement and build support. The film shows how the opposition group was able to small words. Was able to help grow the movement of Wilbur and his associates the growing movement by turning one of Wilbur's supporters to their side with the MP in charge of the Scottish vote. Family advocacy collaboration has taught me that difficult issues that are pledged families generally and physically can be tackled. The family advocacy collaboration has helped me to realize that we can be more effective and productive as a group than we ever could be on our own. It is good to have weekly Zoom meetings to discuss the different topics we are learning and how to apply those principles to the case studies we were given and how they can be applied to our own families to improve the relationships we have in our own homes.
Nice. I like that.
Thank you.
Yeah. I said, so first I talked about the Wilbur thing, and then I talked about my thoughts. So I said, working with his friends was the key to Wilbur's success, in addition to his passion. Each person in his advocacy group came with different backgrounds, experiences, and skills. During the scene where Wilbur listed all of the evidence that they found over time, he listed how he and his friends found it. Equiano had unique experiences, and he documented them, and then he published his book to reach many more people than they could have alone. The lawyer in his group was able to travel and see the treatment of slaves firsthand, and his experiences motivated him to help abolish the slave trade. His knowledge as a lawyer also helped him form their bills, and in the end, his idea allowed for them to help abolish the slave trade. Then I said, this course has taught me a lot about advocacy and teamwork. I've learned that advocates can have many different careers and work in different fields, and a lot of them that I didn't consider before as advocates. And I also learned that working in teams is obviously more effective than working alone. Okay, so for me, after every Zoom meeting, I felt educated and uplifted. My group members always thought of things that I didn't really consider sometimes, so it was nice to be able to learn about like their experiences and their point of view, because it helped enlighten me. I feel like they each have had different experiences, so I was able to learn from them and their stories. And then I included later like a little part of my journal after our research thing, just about how like it super helped me learn about like all of those different threats, but like everybody had different stories and examples of things like that I wouldn't have ever thought of before regarding those. So that's what I put for that one.
Yeah, Ashley was so good at it too. Like she was just
so
many person stories.
Like everybody did.
Where have you been? Seriously, it's just good because everyone has like a personal stories, and you're here like not even married yet or with kids, and you're like
yeah, because I don't have any kids, so I was like, oh,
right.
Oh, yeah.
It was great. Wait, is it my turn or your turn?
I think this one's my turn. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, 5. What parallels do you see between Wilbur and Captain Moroni in Alma 46? What is a Christian and professional family advocate, and how did Wilbur exemplify that? How can you be effective and Christ-like against such loud and often degrading voices? So I said, one of the similarities that stood out to me was both of their abilities to rally the people. Both of them were passionate about what they stood for and what they were fighting for. Their passion drove them to become great leaders. They were both determined to never give up hope. Wilbur and Moroni gathered their people together and led them to work together. They reminded the men and the women that they worked with about what they were fighting for and why it mattered. Both Moroni and Wilbur traveled to round up men to support their causes. They both spoke their minds and let those around them know what they thought was right. Moroni made the title of Liberty, and each year Wilbur helped to form bills to try to make a difference. And then in Alma 46, it stated that Christians are called true believers. Wilbur sees God's hand in all things and desired to serve God. He wanted to dedicate his life to serving God, and eventually he learned that he could do that through his career. He fought for the lives of children and families, and that is how he advocated and served. He never backed down, no matter the odds.
Beautiful. I love how you mentioned the Moroni made the title of Liberty. That's awesome. That just made me think a lot. So what I wrote down is pretty much close to what you said. You can be that we can. What in the world was I writing? Okay.
Sometimes that's how I was. So.
Because I'm just writing my mind. I'm like, did I just come up with a sentence? Okay. that you can be Christ-like by never changing your mind or bending to pressure. Wilbur
Yeah.
Wilford never did, and Captain Marlin never did either. They were both passionate, and committed to the cause. They both maintained their position, never backed down, changed or softened their position. At the same time, they were never unchristian or mean to those regarding voices only. They were just only firm in their position. Wilbur was an advocate by being firm in the position of ending the slave trade that would, as a result, defend the families of slaves from being broken up and sold away as slaves. So, in other words, he knew, like with his personal family, he knew how great it was to be a father, and then just like seeing how slaves lose their children and how fathers have to leave their families. It's just like he was able to feel that feeling on his own with his own kids. Especially when I think there was a scene when he was kissing his wife's stomach and how happy he was and everything. That was just like touching, because like he realized the importance of family, so he wanted that same importance for his family. I mean, for the other slaves' families. So that was very.
I didn't even think about that. I really like that.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
So for 6, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Marcia Barlow spoke on persuasive speaking and writing. Did did Wilbur and others oh my gosh, sorry, my English.
No, it's okay. Exemplify. It's a weird word.
Exemplify any of Marcia's ideas? If so, how so? So Wilbur got to know the story of slavery. For example, he got to see the ships that carried the slaves from Africa to the New World. He built a box to understand the space given to slaves while being transported. This showed him the cruelty that these slaves went through from the duration of the passage. He also got a lot of information from the priest that was a past slave captain, so that he can learn how slaves are treated. All this information allowed the words of Marcia to take place when she says, we need to well read on the opposition side so that we can point out these points. That helps in our persuasion. Wilbur researched the topic of slavery pretty well in order to help people understand why it should be stopped. That's all I wrote.
Oh, that was really good.
I need to write
more. That's good.
Probably I'll get better ideas from you.
No, we'll see. We'll see if mine even makes sense. Let's see. So I said, Marcia Barlow emphasized the importance of being able to effectively share your opinions. She mentioned the effect that stories have on people. Using stories in your arguments or speeches gives your audience a chance to connect with what you're saying. And during Wilbur's speech, when he was on that ship, Madagascar, he kind of told a story of like everybody who was on board, like showing them the chains that they were in, and then he told them how many souls were on. I think he said like it started with 600 people from Africa. When it arrived, there was only 200 that had survived. And then Equiano shared his story through his book, and so that was kind of like the story of self that she was talking about. And then she also discussed how it's important to use facts in your speaking and writing. So I said Wilbur did that a lot, like on his, when he was on that Madagascar boat, like talking about all the souls that were lost. That's kind of like statistics, like giving those numbers and facts. And like I mentioned earlier, during a lot of his speeches, he would use facts to help people understand what was going on. Then I said Wilbur used the story of us when he spoke of how the entire slave trade was taking innocent lives. Many of the people who heard his speeches were somehow involved in the slave trade, and he tried to let them understand how their businesses could go on without the slave trade and how doing what was right should be more important than making money from the slave trade. Wilbur's whole life was spent trying to get everyone on board with the story of now that Marcia Barlow talked about. Each year he was involved in politics. He helped propose new bills that would assist the people in knowing what to do next to abolish the slave trade. And part of the story of now is giving people hope. Wilbur gave people hope that the change could occur by showing them that long document that you talked about with all those signatures. So he gave them hope that there were people who agreed with him and that they could make a change with everybody coming together.
Love it.
Thanks. Hopefully it made sense. As I'm reading through this, I'm like, oh, what was I trying to say?
Well, thanks. You gave me some wonderful points to write about.
Oh, thanks. That's how I feel about all of your answers.
Just pass me all your paper. I didn't write much on this next one, so I'll just listen to you for it.
Yeah, this one's kind of short, I think, for me. Okay, 7. What role did the government, policy, and religious freedom play in the fight of the slave trade? Did you see their political system being pro-family? Why or why not? Answer all of the questions. So I said, the government and policy played a very large role in the slave trade. Each year, Wilbur and his friends tried to write bills to bring to the House of Commons, or whatever that gathering was called. Mm-hmm. The bills would call for the complete abolishment of slave trading, and nobody ever voted to pass those bills. Too many of them were worried about making money and profiting off of it, as well as also worrying about the threat of France taking over and profiting from the slave trade. Eventually, Wilbur was able to get a bill passed that would help end the slave trade, but it had to be disguised as about like the flagged ships. It was passed because of the disguise and not because of the negative effect that it would have on, and because of the negative effect it would have on the French trade, not because attitudes had changed enough. So the slave trade was allowed for so long because there were no laws or policies prohibiting that. Innocent men, women, and children were dying because no one would support a new bill that would change how things were running. In the movie, it also showed preachers in church preaching about the terrible truth of the slave trade in some of those churches. So I said religious freedom played a role in allowing those preachers to be able to speak their thoughts in the congregation. Even though when it showed those, like a lot of people were angry and ended up walking out, they still had that freedom to share. Mm-hmm. And then I said, I didn't see their political system as really being pro-family. It was controlled, it seemed like, by wealthy men. And a lot of, they didn't take into account the thoughts of women and children, it seemed, especially when it came to the slave trade. They weren't thinking about how that was affecting those families. They didn't have a say. So that's what I thought.
Wow. That was good info right there. I just wrote that the links of government greatly affected the fight of the slave trade. When not out of ward, it was a subject that could be freely debated. But when ward struck, it was a nearing sedition and treason. In some ways, yes. I believe a family will behave in much the same way. When it is threatened, it will contract and focus only on the threat, and throw out anything that doesn't deal with a threat. And I actually just put a comma there. So I'll just keep going on that one. So thanks a lot for your tip. And this paper is due today, huh?
Yeah, I think it's due tonight, yeah.
Oh gosh, I definitely have to step up. So number 8, do you feel that, that Wilbur used his time on earth well? How did you see him showing the elements of consecration that Elder Christofferson spoke of? I'll just make my answer small. He seems to be he seems to have a consecrated his life. He seems to have consecrated his whole life and political career to good causes. He dedicated himself to the protection of animals, abolition of slavery, and everything he did was for those causes. He lived a life of integrity. He honored and respected his wife. He fulfilled his husband and dad duties, but yet still prioritized the end of slavery with the support of his wife. He helped his family grow by having kids and feeling the joy of being a father. Wilbur lived a life full of service. He sent his advocates to different areas to gather evidence about slavery. Meanwhile, he would try to help his community realize the negative causes that slavery has been causing to innocent individuals. Wilbur respected the physical body the divine creation in the very image of God. He felt the pain and suffering of what the slaves were feeling. He put himself in their shoes and felt the need of helping them. This showed me that he felt the power of humankind and how we are all children of God, that we wouldn't like to go through such pain like the slaves were going through. It was unfair and injustice for someone to take away your freedom with no explanation. Wilford did show many elements of consecration and felt like he fulfilled his role as a disciple of Christ, even when he didn't know what he was doing. Even though he didn't know he was doing it.
Mm-hmm.
He felt it was something he should do and follow his heart. After all the hard work, he felt the true joy his brothers and sisters will feel, even though he never saw such joy from them physically. But he will always be remembered for what he did and never gave up doing it.
I like that. We have a lot of like the same answers on this one, I think.
It was a good one. It was an easy question.
I said, I definitely thought that Wilbur was a great example and used his time on earth well. He spent his whole life advocating. Even when it was extremely difficult and took a toll on his health, he kept advocating. He focused all his time and energy on finding research and evidence that could be used to change people's minds. And he put all that evidence together so that he could hope to make a difference. Elder Christofferson spoke of the 5 elements of consecration. So for purity, I said, no one is perfect, and the first thing that Wilbur exemplified was the desire to better himself or the desire for correction. There was a time when it seemed like Wilbur was kind of in a bad place when he first met his wife. He was kind of feeling down and he was unhealthy. So eventually he was able to remember what he was passionate about and continue his advocacy work. And then I said he also gave up his medication, which affected his body. So I said both of those things showed that Wilbur had the desire to live the pure element of consecration. And for work, throughout the whole movie, Wilbur was working towards his goal. He was constantly exerting effort. In his talk, Elder Christofferson quoted, "All true work is sacred." Wilbur did not waste his time on earth. Instead, he spent each day working towards a goal that would truly make a difference for thousands and thousands of people. Respect for one's body. Wilbur respected all life. Many people in Wilbur's time saw African people as lesser, or they saw them as property. But Wilbur saw them as people and valued their lives and their bodies. He fought to protect those people and the right to their life and their physical bodies. I also mentioned earlier that he was able to overcome, I don't know if it was an addiction, but kind of his need for that medicine that he had throughout the movie. So he was able to overcome that and quit taking it. And so I think that kind of showed the respect for himself and his own body. Service. Through Wilbur's life of labor, he was serving. He served his local neighbors by providing the poor with meals regularly, and he also served those affected by the slave trade. Through his efforts, many lives were spared, and I think that's an incredible act of service. Mm-hmm. Integrity. Elder Christofferson said that we see integrity in those that put their marriage first and those who are honest. Wilbur always stood by what he believed. Even when people were cruel, he was true to his opinions, and he always made sure to make time for his wife and children and treated them well. That's how I think that one. Thanks. I think we had kind of similar things for that one.
Yeah, I like how you named the elements.
I just made it easier for me to like remember.
Yeah, so great. Man, look at that. We have more questions. We're at number 9 now, huh?
Yeah, we're getting there. Okay, number 9. I think it's my turn.
Yeah.
Any other profound thoughts or personal insights from the movie that are related to child and family advocacy? So I said, I really loved the moment when Wilbur's new friends told him that he could serve God and the people at the same time. When Wilbur was pondering his life laying in the grass, he felt that God had found him, and he was kind of conflicted about what he should do, and he believed that he had to choose like between those two paths, like his career or choosing God. And then I said, in the scriptures, we read that when we are serving our fellow men, we are serving our Heavenly Father. During that interview assignment that I did, I learned that advocacy can take place in many different places. For the longest time, I thought that advocacy kind of had to be done through like bigger organizations, like that met, during big conferences to make the big choices. But through the class, I learned that you can advocate in like any way, including just on social media, like that counts as advocacy. So that was a big eye-opener for me. I said Wilbur was a politician, which gave him a good platform to advocate for the lives of children and families. Sorry, I lost my place again. When we advocate for children or families like Wilbur did in any way, we can make a difference. What we do may seem simple to us, especially maybe simple compared to what Wilbur was able to do, but it could still make a difference, a large difference to a family or a child. And then I said another insight that I had was that Wilbur hardly ever complained about all the work that he was doing and all like the negative toll like that it took on him. I said he worked almost his whole life to change and influence the slave trade. He remained true to his belief throughout his whole life, and even though, like I said, it took a toll on him, he didn't stop sharing his opinions and research. And so I think that it's important, and that's an inspiration to us of advocacy work can be difficult, but we shouldn't stop trying, and that it might seem like we're not making a big difference, but we might be to those around us, and if we stick together, we'll be able to make a bigger difference than working alone.
I love that. I love that you mentioned that he never like complained, and I actually remember that, and he never actually did, even to the point that he was like inviting people to his house. Like,
Yeah.
he didn't have that strength to invite people, like even those the ones that hate slaves and stuff. Like he really had a humble heart. He was willing to like get it done. So for what I wrote in there, I was like, treat children and family members and everyone with respect. We are not meant to be alone. Even William Wilford found his companion, established a wonderful family with her. Anyone can receive the message of God differently and still bring good works and actions to the world that needs it. In this case, the song I Was Blind, I See, like this people had to hit hard rock in order to realize that grace is real and they can change their lives for the better. This shows me that sometimes we have to fall in our hardest times to seek the support of God, and when that happens, we become more closely to Him than ever. When it comes to the MP Fox never meeting with, he was always completely reminded about the slave trade and how the people wanted to end that. But there was a point that he decided to just listen to Wilburn and just go for it and accept it this time and listen to the details of what he had to say and stuff. This is a sign that when we are truly into something, we should not give up and continually bring it up. This shows me that as a community, we are to fight for human rights, whether it may seem impossible at that time, but yet one day we will get our time and things will happen as we have been wanting. Wilburn was able to help others see the big picture of slavery, and he found the way to help others, and finally the fulfillment of ending slavery happened because of his work. I love the message as well that his wife leaves. For example, he was not into her at the beginning, and she was always like seeking to flirt with him, and she just never gave up on him. To the point that he realized that she was a good woman. So this just showed him a message and me that we should not give up for something that we want to get. For example, he never gave up with slavery. And there it shows the message of families, how you can definitely work together and learn lessons from each other in order to succeed in this life.
Yeah, I like that, because I think she really was good at like helping get him out of his little, like when he was down. She
was such a great help. It's just incredible the potential we have. It's my turn, right?
Yeah, are we on 10?
Yeah.
Okay.
Wow. Okay, what was your understanding of the doctrine of the family at the beginning of the semester, and how has it changed? I wrote a lot, but I'm just going to short.
Yeah,
so as at the beginning of class, I just thought that I wanted to become better as being a mother and a wife, and what things I'm supposed to do, such as teaching my children how to love God and how I can how to take care of them spiritually and physically. But while I was going through all our classes, while doing this, I was going through the women's rights. Like, I want my children to learn the women's right, to learn to respect women, to support them as well. And just like how they appreciate me, I'm going to see how they appreciate people. And that's how they show the good works here at our home. For the government, I want my children and family to vote and fulfill their role as citizens. even though they may think that their vote doesn't count. I want them to feel like they have done something to support their candidate. For religion, of course, I want my children to be the light of Christ wherever they go, and I want them to be examples of the believers and act as Christ would act if he's here on this earth. And I don't want them, of course, to be ashamed of the gospel of Christ. When it comes to marriage, I want them to not fall into the temptations of what the world is teaching them right now about same-sex marriage. I want them to realize that how it is to build a family and to love someone to the point of like creating your love with by having kids and bringing kids to the world. And then the other topic that was very touching for me around this whole semester was the floating of the social media, how important it is for us to raise our voice and to share good news to the world, share our thoughts and our actions. And then that's how people will actually get to know us and even ask us questions if we share our thoughts. Like, let's not be afraid. So yeah, that's pretty much all I wrote.
Okay, I like it.
Thank
I think
you.
I would add some more to mine for this one, but so I said at the beginning of the semester, obviously we have a testimony of families, and let me see what I put. Hold on. So I knew obviously the importance of families and the plan of happiness, and then I wanted to be able to learn more from this course to hopefully help strengthen my marriage and then also get me ready to be a better mom one day.
Mm-hmm.
So then I said, okay, so much joy comes from being part of a family, and this course has really helped me see that. So before this course, I didn't really know about all these threats that, like, I knew of some of them, but like not to the extent that this course has taught me. So I was I was able to become more aware of some of the threats, like abortion, same-sex marriage, and I learned how, like, even technology, like something I didn't think of really as like a big threat of how that can affect children and families. So it really helped me be able to see, like, okay, if I know of all these threats before I have children, hopefully it can help me prepare, like, how I want to teach them about each of the things so that they don't fall into kind of how the world views those things.
Mm-hmm.
And then I said, after learning about all the threats that we've talked about this semester, I really strengthened my testimony of that the adversary knows the importance of the family, and he's doing everything that he can to destroy the family. He's thinking of everything that he can to destroy the most important thing. So the knowledge from the course has made me really grateful for my parents and my family that I have and the example that they set, and I'm hoping that I can follow their example to try to do the best that I can when I have kids to raise them in righteousness.
That is so sweet.
Thanks.
Oh, I love it. I need to write that one down. I was like, I'm just writing like education.
No, I really like it. Yours are so thoughtful.
I love it. It's just bullet points make me like just write.
Yeah, no, that's how mine are. I'm like, get to the point. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, the last one.
Yes, okay, my turn. 11. Picture your spouse and children, current or future, and write down some thoughts about how they will benefit from you taking this class. So I said, like I said earlier from the class, I become more aware of the threats to the family, and because of that, hopefully I can be better prepared. I don't have any kids yet, so hopefully I have some time to try to get it together. I can make goals for myself to avoid spending too much time using technology, just because I think that's like so prevalent. It's easy to just use it as like a time waster in between different activities. I also have a goal of being, after the semester, learning about different things that happen in schools, of being really involved in what my children are learning in school in the future. I plan to try to know about their curriculum ahead of time so that I can hopefully talk to them before they learn certain things, like especially during like sex education classes, like being able to talk to them first about those things that are kind of more sensitive.
Yeah.
I've also learned about several people who are good examples of advocacy in this class, and those examples have taught me to be strong and not back down from my beliefs, and hopefully one day my children can learn from that example. And I've also learned how to better communicate with others, which I think will really help me just in life, and then eventually hopefully be able to teach my kids how to do that, and to teach them to become responsible citizens after that one unit of learning about the importance of voting. And then I said they could also benefit from the resources that I've learned in the class. I can teach my child that service can be advocacy, that they can work together to do that, and that no matter how small the service or advocacy that you're doing, it can make a big difference to another child or family that might need that in their lives.
Oh my
Those
gosh,
are just some
I
of the
love it.
ideas. Thanks.
That's so awesome. I love it. I just like it just made me open my mind to really what I learned in class. I'm just like, oh my gosh, I
Yeah.
can't believe I missed that point.
Yeah.
I think I just came to this class to be able to like to learn about how I can better be a mother. But now that I'm going through everything, I'm just like, man, like if there's more than just feeding
Yeah.
and teaching this child.
Yeah.
So I really love that you named the threats, and I feel like that is one of the biggest things I've been benefited from this class, so I can teach my family, because I'm a very like, when it comes to government, like I don't pay any attention to things like that.
Yeah, that's kind of how I am too.
I know, and I'm just like watching news.
Yeah.
It's like your mind is blown, and I'm just like,
Yeah.
why am I watching? This is so sad. But it's good. I was able to what I wrote down, or what I'm going to write down, or what I'm going to write down, is that I want to what I've seen so far happening in my family with the class and stuff. I feel like I've been more aware of like community needs, such as like, wow, this person is struggling what's it called, struggling with like Christmas right now and everything. I feel like my heart has been more softened, and my family's too, and it's just like, it's just incredible when you learn more about like the humans and what they go through.
Yeah.
You get to see in real person, you're just like, oh my gosh, this is real, like it's insane.
Yeah.
You have the skills to help them out then.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like since I don't know if you know this, but I'm pregnant, so it's been rough. So it's just like I'm trying to get all this information to be able to learn how to help my child learn his role as a child, and to not get bullied, and to respect humankind, of course, and
so many things that you don't
to appreciate education too, because I feel like some of them slack and they don't like it, and I'm just like, I wish I can go back and redo my homework. my high school years, my elementary years. So yeah, this class just makes me want to go back and just repent of everything. So yeah, I feel like the threats, of course, I really like the class when we all had to present a paper, and just learning from people, and like how the research was. It was just good to know. It was like it was just, everything was great. And like, of course, what touched me the most was the same-sex marriage. I'm a very opposed person on that, but hearing your guys' point of views, I'm just like, you know what, it is a big deal, but you know what, we can live on this earth with it. Like, it's not the end of the world. Like, we can still love one another. So that was a very touching open mind for me. But yeah, I feel like I'm just going to be kinder. To be more supportive. So
that's how I feel.
Yeah. So it was a good class, and we had a good teacher, so hopefully she's listening to this. So she was always willing to help us out, so that was good. I'm glad she put us in the same group so we can be able to help out. Yeah. Well, best of luck with your semester. Thanks a lot for meeting with me.
No problem. Thank you.
Yeah, well, thanks a lot for your ideas.
Yes, no problem. I think one of us is just supposed to email her the link.
Yeah, I can email her the link. I'll just let me. Should I?
Will you send it to me just in case? Because somewhere I saw something of like the person who doesn't send her the email, I'm supposed to post it on the discussion board. I don't know. Will you just send it to me just in case?
Is it just our discussion board, or with the whole group?
I think just ours, but I'm not sure. Will you just send it to me just in case?